I'm Isabella Thompson, 30 years old. Have you ever sat at a family dinner table, surrounded by people who claim to love you, while they systematically tear apart everything you've worked for? That's where my story begins, at a dinner that changed everything. My father thought he was teaching me a lesson about failure that night. Instead, he learned what happens when you underestimate the quiet one at the table. Before I share how one dinner dismantled years of financial deception, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. It helps more than you know. Now, let me tell you about the night my father's words became his downfall, and how 7 months of silence became my greatest weapon. The mahogany dining table stretched across my parents' formal dining room like a battlefield, 16 place settings gleaming under the crystal chandelier. It was my father's favorite stage, where Robert Thompson, successful entrepreneur and self-proclaimed family patriarch, held court every third Saturday of the month. 15 guests had gathered that October evening. My Aunt Patricia sat to his right, her judgmental eyes already scanning everyone's outfits. My cousin Jennifer and her new husband Mark occupied the seats of honor across from my father. Old family friends, the Davidsons, chatted quietly near the end of the table. 3 of Dad's business associates filled the remaining chairs, their wives making small talk about the weather. My mother, Margaret, moved between the kitchen and dining room with practiced efficiency. She never sat during these dinners, not really. Even when she pulled out her chair, she'd bounce up within seconds to refill someone's glass or fetch another dish. Tonight, she moved like a ghost, serving everyone but never making eye contact, never joining conversations. "Margaret, the wine," my father called out, though his glass was still half full. She materialized instantly, the bottle already in her hand. I watched from my designated spot, 3 seats down on the left, far enough to be ignored but close enough to hear every word. The placement wasn't accidental. In the Thompson family hierarchy, unmarried daughters ranked somewhere between the good china and the household pets. The smell of roasted lamb filled the air, mixing with my father's cologne and the subtle tension that always preceded these gatherings. Dad had already finished his 3rd whiskey. I recognized the signs. The slightly louder laugh, the way he leaned back in his chair like a king surveying his kingdom. Something was coming. I could feel it building like a storm. "So, Isabella," Aunt Patricia's voice cut through the dinner chatter like a well-sharpened knife. "Any special someone we should know about? You're not getting any younger, dear." The table quieted slightly, forks pausing mid-air. This was a familiar dance, but tonight it felt choreographed. "I'm focused on my career right now," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Jennifer laughed, that tinkling sound she'd perfected in her sorority days. She held up her left hand, letting her new 2-carat diamond catch the light. "Oh, Bella, you always say that, but look what I managed to accomplish while still having a career." She glanced at Mark with practiced adoration. "Some of us can have it all." "That's a beautiful ring," Mrs. Davidson offered kindly, trying to redirect the conversation. But my father was already leaning forward, his eyes glinting with something I'd seen too many times before. The whiskey had loosened his tongue just enough. "Jennifer understands priorities," he said, raising his glass toward my cousin. 28 years old and already building a real future. A husband, a home, probably babies soon. He took a long sip. "That's what success looks like." My mother's hands trembled slightly as she set down a serving dish. "Now Isabella here," Dad continued, his voice taking on that performative quality he used in board meetings. "She thinks a laptop can keep her warm at night. Thinks a job title means something when she comes home to an empty apartment." "Robert," Mr. Davidson said quietly, but my father was already standing, glass in hand. No, let me finish. This is important. This is about family legacy." He looked directly at me, and I saw it then, the cruel satisfaction he got from these moments. "So tell us, Isabella, how does it feel being the only failure at this table?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then, as if on cue, nervous laughter rippled through the room. Jennifer giggled behind her napkin. Mark smirked into his wine. Even Aunt Patricia couldn't hide her amusement. My father wasn't done. He was never done when he had an audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, gesturing broadly with his whiskey glass, "let me properly introduce my daughter. 30 years old, single, and still thinking a career can keep her warm at night. No husband, no children, just spreadsheets and conference calls." More laughter, louder this time. "At her age, I'd already built my first company, married your mother." He nodded toward Mom, who stood frozen by the kitchen door. "And had Isabella on the way. But my daughter? She's too good for marriage, too important with her little job to think about giving me grandchildren." "It's not a little job," I said quietly, my hand finding my phone in my pocket. "What was that?" He cupped his ear mockingly. "Did the spinster say something?" "Robert, please," my mother whispered, but he waved her off. "No, Margaret, she needs to hear this. All these years of expensive education, and what do we have to show for it? Jennifer here, younger, smarter, prettier. She figured it out. But Isabella?" He shook his head with theatrical disappointment. 30 and alone. That's not success, sweetheart. That's just sad. The business associates shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Davidson cleared his throat. But nobody defended me. Nobody ever did. I gripped my phone tighter, feeling the weight of the folder in my bag against my chair. 7 months of preparation, 7 months of waiting for exactly the right moment. My father raised his glass one more time. To real success, to family values, to knowing what actually matters in life. Everyone raised their glasses, everyone except me. As glasses clinked around me, my mind drifted to all the moments that led to this one. It started when I was 12, bringing home straight A's only to hear, "Good grades won't find you a husband." At 16, when I won the state mathematics competition, he told the neighbors I was compensating for not being pretty enough. My full scholarship to Northwestern? A waste, since you'll quit working when you have babies. The MBA from Wharton, that I'd funded myself through loans and 70-hour work weeks, meant nothing to him. When I made senior manager at 27, he told everyone at Christmas dinner that I was playing career woman, while my biological clock ticked away. The worst part was how he'd rewritten history. Before I refused to marry his business partner's son 2 years ago, that chinless wonder who thought women shouldn't work after marriage, Dad used to brag about me. I'd been his brilliant daughter then, his future CEO. But the moment I said no to that arranged relationship, I became the family disappointment. "Your sister had 3 kids by 30, he'd remind me, though my sister Kelly lived across the country now, barely calling anymore. "Your cousins all married well," he'd say, as if Jennifer's husband's trust fund was an achievement she'd earned. Every accomplishment I'd fought for became evidence of my failure as a woman. Every promotion was another year wasted not finding a husband. Every success in my career was proof that I had my priorities wrong. "Isabella, are you even listening?" My father's voice snapped me back to the present. "I asked you to stand up and give a toast to Jennifer, to someone who actually understands what success means." I looked at my mother, still hovering by the kitchen door, her eyes pleading with me to just comply. Just this once, just like always. I started to rise from my chair when my mother suddenly appeared at my shoulder, her hand gentle but insistent on my arm. "Please, Isabella," she whispered, so quietly only I could hear. "Don't make him angry. You know how he gets about money when he's upset." Money. Always money with her these days. The way she flinched when he mentioned bank accounts. The way she never bought anything without asking first. "Mom, just apologize," she breathed, her fingers trembling against my sleeve. "Say you're sorry for disappointing him, please." Around us, the guests waited. Jennifer had her phone out, probably ready to capture whatever humiliation came next. Aunt Patricia nodded approvingly at my mother's intervention. "That's right, Margaret," Aunt Patricia said loudly. "Help her understand. Some of us appreciate traditional values. Some of us understand that a woman's greatest achievement is her family. Hear, hear, Mark chimed in, earning an approving look from my father. Mr. Davidson's wife touched his arm, whispering something, but he just shook his head slightly. Even the Davidsons, who'd known me since I was 5, wouldn't speak up. The 3 business associates studied their plates as if the lamb held the secrets of the universe. I was completely alone at a table full of people. "Stand up, Isabella," my father commanded. "Show some respect for once in your life." My mother's grip tightened. "Please," she mouthed silently, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never noticed before. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. "What are you so afraid of, Mom?" I asked quietly. She pulled back as if I'd slapped her, glancing nervously at my father. "I'm not. I just want everyone to have a nice evening." But I saw the truth in that glance. She was terrified. And suddenly, I wondered what else I'd been missing all these years. If you've ever felt invisible at your own family table, drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories give me strength to share mine. It's amazing how many of us have sat through these moments, believing we had no choice but to endure them. But here's what I learned that night. Sometimes the quietest person at the table holds the most power. The key is knowing when to use it. Stay with me. What happens next changed everything. And I mean everything. The woman who walked into that dinner and the one who left were 2 completely different people. My father set down his glass with deliberate force, the sound sharp against the mahogany table. "Since you seem incapable of showing basic gratitude," he said, his voice taking on that dangerous edge I knew too well, "let me make something crystal clear. I've been very patient with your lifestyle choices, Isabella. Very generous, considering." Generous? The word slipped out before I could stop it. "Yes, generous." He pulled out his phone with theatrical flair. "I spoke with my lawyer last week. Did a little estate planning update. You see, family money should go to actual family. People who understand what that word means." Jennifer leaned forward, eyes bright with interest. My mother went completely still. "I've restructured everything," he continued, scrolling through his phone. "Jennifer and Mark will be the primary beneficiaries now. They're building something real, a legacy. While you—" He looked up, his smile cold. "You've chosen your career over family, so live with that choice." "Robert," Mr. Davidson interjected carefully, "perhaps this isn't the time." "It's the perfect time, Bill. Isabella needs to understand consequences." My father stood again, commanding the room. "The Thompson Family Trust, the investment properties, the portfolio I've built over 30 years, none of it goes to someone who spits on family values. I never— You refuse to marry, refuse to have children, refuse to be a real woman," he cut me off. "So I'm refusing to subsidize your selfishness anymore. Last week's changes are already filed. Irrevocable." The room held its breath. Jennifer couldn't hide her smile. Mark actually raised his glass slightly as if in toast. "Real family members get real inheritance," my father declared. "And Isabella, you're barely family anymore. Just a disappointment with my last name." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. I didn't need to look to know what it said. My mother's chair scraped against the floor as she suddenly stood, her hands visibly shaking as she reached for empty plates that didn't need clearing. "Margaret, sit down," my father commanded. "The help can clear later." "I just thought— The dessert," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I said sit." She sank back into her chair like a marionette with cut strings. That's when I noticed she wasn't wearing the pearl necklace he'd given her for their 25th anniversary. Or any jewelry at all, actually. When had that started? "Your mother knows her place," my father said, eyes still on me. "She's grateful for what I provide, the house, the cars, the lifestyle. She doesn't have delusions about independence." Mom's face flushed deep red. "Robert, please." "What's your bank account balance, Margaret?" he asked casually, swirling his whiskey. "Go on, tell everyone." Silence. "She doesn't know," he announced to the table. "Because she doesn't need to." I handle everything. Every credit card, every bill, every financial decision. That's how a real marriage works. The man provides, the woman appreciates. I watched my mother shrink into herself, 55 years old, and unable to buy groceries without his permission. When had she lost access to her own accounts? When had she become so completely dependent? At least your mother gave me children, he continued, even if one of them turned out to be an ungrateful spinster. My phone buzzed again. This time I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. The message was simple. Everything is ready. Your call. I looked at my mother's defeated face, at Jennifer's smug satisfaction, at the uncomfortable silence of people who could speak up but wouldn't. Then I smiled. For the first time all evening, I genuinely smiled. You're right, Dad, I said calmly. Money is power. You taught me that. Finally, some sense from you, my father said, mistaking my calm for surrender. Tell me, Dad, I said, setting my phone face down on the table. Still playing CEO at work? His eyes narrowed. Playing? I built that company from nothing. Interesting choice of words. I took a sip of water. I manage millions. Managing other people's money isn't success, he scoffed. It's being a glorified accountant. But can't manage a relationship, Jennifer added, earning an approving nod from him. Quality over quantity, I replied, looking directly at Mark, who shifted uncomfortably. Quality? My father laughed harshly. What quality? You're alone, Isabella. Completely alone. At least I know where my money goes. The words hung in the air. My mother's eyes widened slightly. My father's jaw clenched. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said evenly. Just that financial transparency is important. Wouldn't you agree? Don't get smart with me. I learned from the best. I turned to Mr. Davidson. You handle corporate accounts, right, Bill? Must be interesting tracking where company funds actually go. Mr. Davidson looked confused but nodded slowly. Transparency is essential in business. Exactly. I smiled at my father. Every transaction tells a story. Enough riddles, Aunt Patricia interjected. Robert's right. You need to apologize for your attitude. My attitude? I laughed softly. Is that what we're calling it? Show some respect, Mark said, puffing up beside Jennifer. Your father deserves better. Does he? I asked. Tell me, Mark, what exactly does he deserve? My father slammed his hand on the table. I deserve a daughter who isn't a complete failure. Define failure, I said calmly. You, 30, single, barren, alone. And you? I asked. What are you? The question seemed to confuse him. Good. He had no idea what was coming. I'm a success, my father roared, standing so forcefully his chair tipped backward. I'm everything you're not. Please, everyone, let's calm down, Mrs. Davidson tried, but my father was beyond reasoning. Look at you, he continued, his voice dripping with disgust. 30 years old and nothing to show for it but a job title. Your biological clock is screaming, and you're too selfish to listen. Robert! Mr. Davidson stood up. That's quite enough. No, Bill, she needs to hear this. He turned back to me. You're going to die alone, Isabella. Alone in some sterile apartment, surrounded by spreadsheets instead of grandchildren. Jennifer actually applauded softly. Someone had to say it. You know what your problem is? My father leaned across the table. You think you're better than everyone. Too good for marriage, too important for motherhood. But you're not special, Isabella. You're just broken. My mother was crying silently now, tears streaming down her face. Every woman at this table has figured it out except you, he gestured around the room. They understand their purpose, but you're an evolutionary dead end. That's a bit harsh, one of the business associates muttered, but his wife shushed him. Harsh? It's honest. My father picked up his whiskey, draining it. 30 years I invested in her. Private schools, college, everything. And this is my return? A bitter spinster who'll never give me grandchildren? You have Kelly's kids, I reminded him quietly. Kelly married properly, had children properly, did everything properly. He refilled his glass with shaking hands. Not like you. You're nothing but a disappointment with an expense account. The room was suffocating. Everyone stared at me, waiting for me to break, to cry, to run. Instead, I remained perfectly still, my hand resting on my phone. Now, my father said, raising his freshly filled glass, we're going to do this properly. Everyone, raise your glasses to Jennifer, to real success, to someone who actually makes their family proud. Glasses rose around the table. The crystal caught the light, creating small rainbows on the walls. Even Mr. Davidson reluctantly lifted his glass, though he wouldn't meet my eyes. And you, my father pointed at me, are going to stand up and toast your cousin. Tell everyone how proud you are of someone who didn't waste their youth on meaningless ambitions. Robert, please, my mother begged. Stand up, he bellowed. I rose slowly, my phone in one hand, reaching for my water glass with the other. Go on, Jennifer smirked. Tell everyone how successful I am, how I have everything you don't. That's right, my father nodded. Say it, Isabella. Admit what you are. Say the words, I'm a failure, and Jennifer is everything I'm not. The room held its breath. Aunt Patricia leaned forward eagerly. Mark had his phone out, recording. Even the business associates had given up pretending not to watch. Say it, my father commanded, or get out of my house forever. I looked around the table, at these people who'd watched me grow up, who'd celebrated my graduations, attended my birthday parties, claimed to care about me. Not one of them would stand up for me, not one. You want me to make a toast? I asked, pulling out my phone. Finally, my father said triumphantly. I unlocked my phone, opened an app, and set it on the table. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents. I'll do you one better, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. I'll tell you all a story about success. Real success. My phone lit up with a notification. A simple message. Transfer complete. All systems ready. What are you doing? My father demanded, but I held up one finger, asking for patience. 7 months ago, I began, still standing, something interesting happened. Dad, do you remember that night in March? You came home from your business trip to Miami? His face flickered with something. Confusion, concern. You were celebrating. You'd closed some big deal, you said. Had too much champagne on the plane. I opened the folder, pulling out the first document. You asked me to help you with some paperwork, said your eyes were too tired to read the fine print. I don't remember. You were very insistent, said it was just routine business documents, trust arrangements, power of attorney for the company transitions. I held up the paper. You signed everything I put in front of you. My mother looked between us, confused. Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. That was also the night you mentioned needing to restructure some assets, I continued. You were so chatty. Alcohol always did loosen your tongue. What's your point? Aunt Patricia snapped. More career woman nonsense? My point, I said, pulling out my phone again, is that success comes in many forms. For instance, did you know that in my role at Morrison Industries, I oversee forensic accounting? Mr. Davidson sat up straighter. Forensic accounting? Mm-hmm. We investigate financial irregularities, trace hidden transactions, uncover redirected funds. I swiped through my phone. It's fascinating what you can find when you know where to look. My father's face had gone pale. What did you do? Nothing yet, I said calmly. But the night is young, and unlike you, Dad, I actually read the fine print, every single word. The folder felt heavy with possibility. I pulled out another document, this one with a corporate letterhead that made Mr. Davidson lean forward with interest. You know what's funny about joint accounts? I asked the room. They tell stories. Every transaction, every transfer, every mysterious withdrawal. Isabella, my father warned, his voice low and dangerous. March 15th, I continued, ignoring him. $50,000. Business development. April 3rd, 30,000. Client entertainment. May through September, another 120,000, all from the joint investment account. My mother's face went white. What joint account? The one you co-own, Mom. The one that requires dual signatures for withdrawals over 10,000. I looked at her steadily. Except when someone has power of attorney. Stop this, my father commanded. But here's the interesting part. I pulled out a bank statement. These withdrawals? They all went to the same account. A rental property on Riverside Drive. Apartment 12B. Jennifer gasped softly. Even she hadn't expected this turn. Now I thought maybe it's a legitimate investment property, I said, my voice conversational. So I did some checking. The lease is interesting. Single occupant, a woman named Sandra Mitchell, 28 years old, personal trainer. The room was dead silent. My mother stood up slowly, her legs shaking. You signed something that night in March, I told my father. Several things, actually, while you were celebrating your big deal and demanding I help with paperwork. You tricked me? Tricked? I laughed softly. No, Dad, you were drunk and arrogant. You signed without reading, just like you've done 100 times before. You trusted me to handle the details. I set the folder on the table. The difference is, this time I actually did. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping your dignity? That moment when you realize the price of silence has become too high. The decision I made next wasn't easy, but it was necessary. If this resonates with you, please share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps me reach others who might be facing similar situations. Sometimes we don't realize we have options until someone shows us that we do. Now, back to that dining room, where 15 people were about to witness what happens when years of financial deception finally come to light. Enough games! My father slammed both hands on the table, making the glasses jump. You're trying to embarrass me with lies? In my own home? Embarrass you? I remained calm. Like you've embarrassed me for the past hour? You need to apologize, now, to everyone. He gestured around the table. Apologize for being a failure, for these ridiculous accusations, for wasting everyone's time with your jealousy. Jealousy? I almost laughed. You're jealous of Jennifer, of her success, her marriage, her future. He moved closer to where I stood. So you make up stories about affairs and money? Pathetic. Mr. Davidson shifted uncomfortably. Robert, perhaps we should— No, Bill. She started this. She's going to finish it. My father turned back to me. On your knees. What? Even Jennifer looked shocked. You heard me. You want to act like a child? Be treated like one. On your knees, apologize to this family for your failures and your lies. My mother grabbed his arm. Robert, no. He shook her off so violently she stumbled. Stay out of this, Margaret. This is insane, Mrs. Davidson said, standing. We're leaving. Sit down, my father roared. Nobody leaves until she apologizes. The 3 business associates were already gathering their things, their wives whispering urgently. But my father didn't notice. He only had eyes for me. Say it, he demanded. Say, I'm a failure. I'm nothing. I'm sorry for disappointing everyone. I looked at this man who'd raised me, who'd once pushed me on swings and taught me to ride a bike, who'd become this monster who needed to destroy me to feel powerful. You want me to kneel? I asked quietly. Yes. In front of everyone. Yes. I nodded slowly. Okay, but first, you should probably check your phone. Check my phone? He pulled it out aggressively. For what? More of your games? Just check your banking app, I suggested. Any of them. This is ridiculous. But his fingers moved across the screen anyway. The room watched as his expression shifted from anger to confusion. What did you— His voice trailed off as he swiped frantically. Having trouble logging in? I asked innocently. Say it! He looked up, his face red. Say you're a failure! Say it now! Jennifer laughed nervously. Uncle Robert's right. Just apologize, Isabella. This is getting weird. Weird? I turned to my cousin. You want to know what's weird? A father who tracks his adult daughter's ovulation cycle, who sends her articles about egg freezing, who tells waitresses she's single and desperate. You're deflecting, Aunt Patricia said. Just admit you're jealous and— I'm not jealous, I interrupted. I'm free. There's a difference. My father threw his phone on the table. You think you're so clever? You're nothing. A barren, bitter woman who'll die alone with her spreadsheets. Robert, Mr. Davidson stood up. That's enough. It's never enough, my father shouted. She needs to learn her place. I pulled another document from the folder. Speaking of places, Dad, do you want to tell Mom about Sandra's place, or should I? My mother was standing perfectly still, her face a mask of controlled pain. She'd known. Of course she'd known. There's nothing to tell, he said, but his voice wavered. Nothing? I smiled, that same cold smile he'd given me earlier. Then you won't mind if I share some photos? From your business trips? The room held its breath. You're destroying this family, he said quietly. No, Dad. I'm just done pretending it isn't already broken. I stood perfectly still, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then, slowly, deliberately, I pulled the final set of documents from the folder. Before I show these, I said, turning to my mother, Mom, you should know something. I've been protecting you for 7 months. She blinked, confused. Protecting me? From the truth. From the full extent of it. I held out a single sheet of paper to her. But you deserve to know everything. My father lunged forward, trying to grab the paper, but Mr. Davidson stepped between us. Robert, stop! This is my house, my father shouted. Actually, I said calmly, that's one of the things we need to discuss. My mother took the paper with trembling hands. As she read, her face cycled through emotions, confusion, recognition, shock, and finally, a strange kind of relief. You knew? She whispered to me. I've known everything since March. Jennifer stood up, Mark beside her. What's going on? Uncle Robert? Your uncle, I said, never taking my eyes off my father, has been very busy, building his legacy, as he likes to say. Shut up, he hissed. Or what? I asked. You'll disinherit me? Already done. Kick me out? I was leaving anyway. Destroy my reputation? You've been doing that for years. I turned to address the room. You all came here tonight to witness something. Well, you're about to. The folder still had several documents left, each one meticulously organized, labeled, waiting. I've been paying attention, Dad, I said quietly. To everything, every transaction, every lie, every legal document you signed without reading. His face had gone from red to white. What did you do? What you taught me, I replied. I protected my assets. Mr. Davidson, I said, turning to my father's oldest friend, you know Morrison Industries, don't you? He nodded slowly. Of course. Fortune 500. We've tried to get their business for years. Would you mind telling everyone what position someone would need to hold there to oversee a $500 million portfolio? His eyes widened with understanding. That would be C-suite level, senior executive. More specifically, Chief Financial Officer, CFO. He stared at me with new recognition. You're not just managing money, are you? No, I said simply. I'm the youngest CFO in Morrison Industries history. 7-figure salary, stock options, and a seat on the board pending next quarter. The room erupted. Jennifer's mouth fell open. Mark actually dropped his wine glass. Even Aunt Patricia looked stunned. That's impossible, my father sputtered. You said you were an analyst. No, Dad. You assumed I was an analyst. You never asked, never listened. Too busy telling me about my failures to hear about my successes. You're lying. Mr. Davidson pulled out his phone, typing quickly. Robert, she's telling the truth. It's right here. Isabella Thompson, CFO, Morrison Industries. There's a whole press release from January. January? My mother looked at me. You've been CFO since January? Since my 30th birthday, actually. The board approved it as their gift to the company. Their words, not mine. But you never said, Jennifer started. When? I asked. During the lectures about my biological clock, between the jokes about dying alone, or maybe while Dad was calling me a failure? My father sank into his chair. It doesn't matter. You're still alone, still empty. Am I? I pulled out my phone, showing a bank balance that made Jennifer gasp. Seems pretty full to me. Now that we've established I'm not the failure you thought, I said, pulling out a stack of bank statements, let's talk about where the family money has really been going. Don't you dare! $200,000, Dad. That's what you've taken from the joint investment account in 7 months. I spread the statements across the table. Mom, did you know about any of these withdrawals? My mother shook her head, tears flowing freely now. But here's the interesting part, I continued, pulling out rental agreements. Riverside Drive, apartment 12B, lease signed in March, rent, $8,000 a month, paid from the family account. That's a business property, my father said weakly. Really? Then why is it furnished with $60,000 of furniture from Bergdorf's? Why are there monthly charges for spa services, personal shopping, and a car lease for a Mercedes? I pulled out photos, credit card statements, receipts, delivery confirmations. Stop, he pleaded. Sandra Mitchell, 28, Pilates instructor. Met her at your gym, didn't you? Same age as Jennifer, younger than your failure of a daughter. Jennifer backed away from the table. Uncle Robert, is this true? But wait, I said, pulling out more papers. It gets better. Mom, did you know Dad opened 3 credit cards in your name? Maxed out, of course. $40,000 in debt you never knew about. What? My mother grabbed the statements. Or that he refinanced the house last year? Pulled out $500,000 in equity? The money's gone, Mom. All of it. Spent on his business trips and his girlfriend. Mr. Davidson looked disgusted. Robert, how could you? She doesn't understand business, my father said desperately. These are investments. In a 28-year-old Pilates instructor? I asked. Is that what we're calling it? But here's the best part, I said, pulling out the final document, the one that mattered most. Dad, remember that night in March, when you were so drunk you could barely stand? His face went gray. You signed a comprehensive power of attorney. Irrevocable, giving me complete control over all your financial assets. I held up the document, his signature clear at the bottom. You were so eager to have me handle the boring paperwork while you celebrated. That's not legal. Actually, it is, Mark said quietly, finally speaking up. Everyone turned to stare at him. I'm a contract lawyer. That's completely binding if properly witnessed and notarized. Which it was, I confirmed, by 2 Morrison Industries executives who happened to be at the restaurant that night. Completely legal, completely binding. You tricked me! No, I saved you. For 7 months I've been managing everything. Paying your bills, your mortgage, your credit cards, even your girlfriend's rent. I smiled coldly. I've been the only thing standing between you and complete financial ruin. You can't. I can. I have been. Check your phone again, Dad. Really look this time. He grabbed his phone, fingers shaking as he opened app after app. His face grew paler with each swipe. Everything's frozen, he whispered. Not frozen, transferred. To accounts only I control. Every asset, every investment, every penny that wasn't already spent on Sandra. I gathered my documents. For 7 months, you've been completely dependent on me. The failure, the spinster, the disappointment. Give it back! He stood, lunging toward me again. No. The simple words stopped him cold. As of midnight tonight, I announced to the room, I'm stopping all payments. Every single one. Effective tomorrow morning, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. Every credit card in your name will be declined. The mortgage payment due next week won't process. Your car payments, insurance, country club membership, all of it stops. You can't do this. He was shaking now, real fear replacing the anger. I can and I am. I turned to my mother. Mom, I've set up an account in your name only. 6 months of living expenses, fully funded. The divorce lawyer is already paid for. Rebecca Martinez, the best in the state. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. The house is leveraged to the maximum, I continued. It'll have to be sold, but Mom will get half of whatever's left after the debts are paid. The court will make sure of that. This is theft, my father shouted. No, this is consequence. I pulled out one final paper. This is a full accounting of every dollar you've stolen from Mom's inheritance, from the joint accounts, from the family trust. Your lawyer can explain how bad this looks in divorce court. Nobody will believe you. They don't have to believe me. The paper trail speaks for itself. I looked around the room. 7 months of documentation, every receipt, every transfer, every lie. Jennifer was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Uncle Robert, how could you do this to Aunt Margaret? Your business creditors will be very interested to know your company credit line was secured with falsified documents, I added. That's fraud, by the way. Please, he begged, all bravado gone. Isabella, please. The way you said please when you demanded I get on my knees? That kind of please? Mr. Davidson stood. We should go. This is a family matter now. But nobody moved. They all wanted to see how this ended. My father grabbed his phone again, frantically calling his lawyer. Jim, I need you to... His face crumbled as he listened. What do you mean conflict of interest? She's my daughter. He hung up, immediately dialing another number. His bank, his broker, anyone who might help. But it was Saturday night, and even if it wasn't, there was nothing they could do. The contracts are airtight, Mark said quietly to Jennifer. I'm looking at them now. She's had 7 months to make sure everything was perfect. You planned this, my father said, his voice hollow. You've been planning this since March. Since the night you came home drunk and bragging about your sweet young thing on the side? Yes. I picked up my bag. Since you laughed about how Mom was too stupid to notice the missing money? Absolutely. I gave you everything. You gave me trauma and criticism. I earned everything else myself. He turned desperately to the room. Someone help me. Bill, you understand business. This can't be legal. Mr. Davidson shook his head. You signed the papers, Robert. You gave her complete authority. While drunk. Still conscious. Still legal. Mark confirmed. Any first-year law student could tell you that. My father sank into his chair, finally understanding the full scope of his situation. No money, no assets, no control. Everything he'd built his identity on, gone. The apartment lease is in your name, I told him. Sandra's apartment. It's paid through the end of the month. After that, you're on your own. This failure, he whispered, looking at me with genuine bewilderment. This disappointment just destroyed me. No, Dad, you destroyed yourself. I just stopped enabling it. The room was silent except for my mother's quiet crying, though I noticed they might have been tears of relief. The silence that followed was deafening, then chaos. Aunt Patricia stood abruptly, knocking over her wineglass. This is insane. Margaret, are you going to let her do this? My mother straightened her spine for the first time all evening. He's been cheating on me for 2 years, Patricia, stealing my inheritance. What would you have me do? But family, Family? Mom laughed bitterly. Where was family when he humiliated our daughter? When you all sat here laughing at her? Jennifer grabbed Mark's arm. We should go. Wait, Mr. Davidson said, turning to me with something like admiration. Isabella, Morrison Industries has been looking for someone to head our new ethics division, someone who understands both finance and integrity. Would you be interested? Bill, my father croaked. You're offering her a job? Now? I'm offering her a board position, actually. We need someone who can spot deception and isn't afraid to act on it. He handed me his card. Call me Monday. The three business associates were already at the door, their wives pulling them along. One turned back. Robert, we'll need to discuss the partnership. This kind of scandal. Get out, my father screamed. All of you, get out! But it was his house in name only now, and everyone knew it. Actually, I said calmly, Mom's name is on the deed too. Mom, do you want them to leave? My mother looked at the cowering man who'd controlled her for 30 years, then at the daughter he'd tried to break. No, she said firmly. Robert can leave. This is my dinner party now. The transformation was stunning. My mouse of a mother finally finding her roar. You can't. I can. And I am. She stood tall. Get out of my house. My father stood on shaking legs, looking around the room for any ally, any support. He found none. Jennifer, he tried, reaching for his niece. You understand. Tell them. Tell them about family loyalty. Jennifer stepped back, shaking her head. You called Isabella a failure while you were stealing from Aunt Margaret? That's not family, Uncle Robert. That's just cruel. For the first time in my life, I saw my father truly alone. No audience to perform for, no power to wield, no money to control. Just a 60-year-old man who'd built his entire identity on lies. You were so busy calling me a failure, I said quietly. You never noticed who was signing your checks. Every payment for the last 7 months came from accounts I control. You've been living on my mercy since March. I'm your father. Biologically, yes, but you haven't been a father in years. You've been a bully with a bank account, and now you're just a bully. My mother walked to the front door and opened it. Leave, Robert. Take your car. It's paid through Tuesday. After that, it gets repossessed. Margaret, please. 27 years, she said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. 27 years of controlling every penny, every decision, every aspect of my life. It ends tonight. He looked at me one last time, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been regret, or maybe just self-pity. It was hard to tell with him. You've destroyed everything, he said. No, Dad. I've set everyone free, even you. Now you can go build something real, if you're capable of it. Without Mom's money, without my support, without the facade. He left then, his footsteps heavy on the marble floor he'd been so proud of. Within an hour, everyone in that dining room had spread the word. By morning, it would be everywhere. Country clubs, business meetings, social circles my father had spent decades cultivating. Mr. Davidson called me Monday morning, as promised. Not just about the board position, though that came through too, but to tell me what was happening in the business community. Your father tried to get an emergency loan, he said. 5 banks turned him down. Word travels fast when someone's been exposed for fraud. The girlfriend, Sandra? She'd cleared out the apartment the very next day. Apparently, she'd been recording their conversations too, planning her own exit strategy. She even sent me a thank you note for accelerating her timeline. I had to respect the hustle. Jennifer called me later that week. I'm sorry, she said simply, for everything, for laughing, for not speaking up, for being a coward. We all make choices, I told her. Mark left me, she admitted. Said if I could laugh at family being destroyed like that, what would I do to him? I felt no satisfaction in her pain, just a sad recognition that my father's poison had spread further than even I'd realized. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Mom got the house in the settlement. Turns out judges don't look kindly on financial abuse and infidelity. She sold it immediately, bought a small condo near the beach, and started taking art classes. I haven't painted in 30 years, she told me over lunch. Your father said it was a waste of time. My father? Last I heard, he was working as a consultant for a small firm in Jersey. living in a studio apartment, dating someone age-appropriate who didn't know about his past. Maybe he'd learned something, maybe not. It wasn't my concern anymore. 6 months after that dinner, I sat in my new office, board director at Morrison Industries, the youngest in company history. The wall behind my desk held my diplomas, awards, and a single photo. Mom and me at her art show, both of us genuinely smiling. She'd found herself after 27 years of being erased. Started therapy, joined a support group for financial abuse survivors, even began dating a kind widower from her painting class. I spent so many years afraid, she told me. Afraid of being alone, of having nothing, of his anger. But you showed me something that night, that the fear of staying was worse than the fear of leaving. I'd established new rules for my life. Clear boundaries, professionally maintained, no lending money to family who hadn't spoken to me in years but suddenly remembered I existed. No attending family gatherings where my presence was tolerated rather than welcomed. No apologizing for my success, my choices, or my standards. No explaining why being single at 31 didn't make me a failure. Jennifer reached out occasionally, trying to rebuild something from the ashes of our relationship. I was cordial but careful. Trust, once broken by laughter at your lowest moment, doesn't easily repair. I learned something important, I told her during one coffee meeting. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Staying silent while being abused is. She nodded, understanding. Do you ever regret it? What you did to Uncle Robert? I didn't do anything to him, I corrected. I simply stopped enabling his behavior. There's a difference between revenge and consequences. But you planned it, for months. I protected myself and my mother, legally, ethically, professionally. I stood to leave. That's not revenge, that's self-defense. Looking back now, I realize that dinner was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed watching my father fall, I didn't, but because it forced me to stop seeking approval from someone incapable of giving it. Success isn't about meeting other people's expectations. It's not about marriage by 30, or children by 35, or any other arbitrary timeline society creates. Success is building a life that's truly yours, with values you've chosen, boundaries you maintain, and relationships that nurture rather than diminish you. My father called me a failure because I wouldn't follow his script. But I was never failing. I was writing my own story, one where a woman's worth isn't measured by her relationship status or her willingness to be small. The most powerful thing you can do isn't seeking revenge or proving others wrong. It's simply stopping the enabling, stopping the financial support, stopping the emotional labor for people who don't value it. That night, I didn't destroy my father. His own choices did that. I just stopped catching him when he fell. Your worth isn't determined by your relationship status, your reproductive choices, or anyone else's expectations. You deserve respect, not because of what you produce or whom you marry, but because you exist. And sometimes, the greatest act of love, for yourself and others, is refusing to enable those who would diminish you. If someone needs you to be small for them to feel big, that's not love, that's control, and you have every right to break free from it. The only failure in life is living by someone else's definition of success. Remember that. Especially when you're sitting at your own family's table, feeling alone in a room full of people who should love you better. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by others. What boundaries have you had to set with family? Share your story in the comments. I read and respond to as many as I can. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop enabling those who disrespect you. Until next time, this is Isabella Thompson, reminding you that you deserve respect, regardless of your choices. You are enough, exactly as you are.